I never thought my own family would betray me. Not after everything I'd sacrificed, every story I'd chased across war zones and through corrupt government halls. But there I was, frozen in the shadows of my son's campaign office, listening to my daughter-in-law sell me out like yesterday's headlines. "Don't worry about Constance," Margot's voice carried through the cracked door, smooth as polished marble. "Once Deacon wins, we'll have access to her accounts. I've already picked out that lakefront property. That old Pulitzer money is just sitting there, waiting for someone with vision." My hand trembled against the wall, not from the lingering effects of my stroke, but from pure, unadulterated rage. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined this moment. I was Constance Reeves, respected journalist with 40 years of integrity behind my name. Now, apparently, I was just a bank account with an expiration date. Detroit winters had always been brutal, but none as cold as the realization that my son's wife saw me as nothing but a checkbook. I pulled my scarf tighter around my neck and backed away silently, decades of investigative instincts kicking in. Document everything, find evidence, follow the money. The very skills that had earned me that Pulitzer were about to save what remained of my life. I'd spent my career bringing down corrupt politicians and businessmen who thought themselves untouchable. I never imagined I'd need to use those skills against my own family. But if there's one thing I'd learned in 72 years on this earth, it's that betrayal doesn't discriminate based on blood. The drive home that evening felt surreal. Snowflakes danced in my headlights as I navigated the familiar roads of Winchester, Michigan, the small town I'd reluctantly retired to after my stroke 3 years ago. My doctor had called it a minor event, but the newspaper called it career ending. I'd fought it, of course. Constance Reeves didn't go quietly. But when your words occasionally scramble mid-sentence and your right hand develops a slight tremor, even the most sympathetic editor has to make decisions. My modest Victorian home appeared through the snowy haze, its windows glowing warmly against the darkness. I'd bought it with Howard's life insurance after he died, needing a fresh start away from our Detroit apartment filled with memories of our 40-year marriage. It was supposed to be my sanctuary. Now it felt like just another asset Margot was tallying. Inside, I headed straight for my office. Not the formal one downstairs where I sometimes met with former colleagues, but my real workspace in the converted attic. Papers covered every surface. Sticky notes created a chaotic rainbow against the walls. Old habits die hard. I'd been tracking inconsistencies in Deacon's campaign finances for weeks, my journalistic instincts buzzing despite my attempts to ignore them. I didn't want to believe my son could be involved in anything unethical, but Margot's influence had changed him in ways that frightened me. I picked up a notepad and wrote the date at the top, then detailed everything I'd overheard, my hand steadier than it had been in months. Anger, it seemed, was quite the medicine. My phone rang, displaying Zora's name, my granddaughter, the one bright light in this darkening family drama. "Gran, are you coming to the rally tomorrow?" Her voice held the passionate energy that reminded me so much of myself at 17. "Dad's giving his big speech on educational reform." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "How's that article coming for the school paper?" "Almost done. I'm exposing the administration's misuse of funds meant for arts programs." Pride swelled in my chest. She was following in my footsteps, fearless and principled. "Just make sure all your sources are verifiable," I advised automatically. "I learned from the best," she replied. "Gran, are you okay? You sound tired." I hesitated. Zora worshipped her father despite his growing political ambition, and while she and Margot often clashed, I couldn't burden her with what I'd discovered. Not yet. Just the usual evening fatigue, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about. After we hung up, I pulled out my laptop and logged into my banking portal. Everything seemed normal, but for how long? Margot's words echoed in my mind. I needed to protect myself, and quickly. The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to Imani Washington, my oldest friend and confidant. We'd met during the Detroit riots in 1967. She was a young law student documenting police brutality, and I was a fledgling reporter hungry for the truth. 5 decades later, she was a retired constitutional law professor with connections throughout the Michigan legal system. "Connie, you need a lawyer," she said after I recounted what I'd overheard. Not just any lawyer. You need someone who specializes in elder law and estate planning. I'm not some helpless old woman, I snapped, the words bitter on my tongue. No, you're a smart woman who knows the value of preparation, Imani countered. This isn't about age. It's about protecting what's yours from people who think they deserve it more than you do. My second call was to Lowell Freeman. Calling him felt like admitting defeat, but desperate times called for desperate measures. For 20 years, we'd been rivals chasing the same stories across Michigan and beyond, each determined to outdo the other. His Detroit Chronicle against my Michigan Herald. When his paper bought out mine 10 years ago, I'd taken it as a personal affront. But he'd kept my column, respecting my voice even when we disagreed. Then, after my stroke, he'd been the one to fight the hardest to keep me on staff, offering me feature pieces that could accommodate my slower writing pace. I'd declined out of pride. Now I needed his help. Constance Reeves, his gruff voice answered after 3 rings. Hell must have frozen over. Save the commentary, Lowell. I need information. He chuckled. Some things never change. What's the story? I hesitated. It's personal and confidential. A pause. Your son's campaign? My breath caught. How did you... I may be semi-retired, but I still know dirty money when I see it. Your daughter-in-law has been meeting with some questionable donors. I've had a junior reporter keeping tabs, but we don't have enough for a story yet. The confirmation made my stomach turn. I need documentation, Lowell. Bank transfers, meeting records, anything you can get me. This isn't just another corruption story, Connie. This is your family. Are you sure you want to pull this thread? I closed my eyes, seeing Margot's perfectly poised face as she stood beside Deacon at campaign events, her hand possessively on his arm. I thought of how my son had changed, from the compassionate teacher who'd married his college sweetheart to this power-hungry stranger who rarely called unless he needed something. Campaign donations, babysitting for Zora, my presence at fundraisers to lend credibility. I've spent my life exposing the truth, Lowell. I'm not stopping now, especially when it matters most. That afternoon, I attended Deacon's rally at the Winchester Community Center. The room buzzed with local supporters, campaign volunteers in blue shirts distributing flyers. I spotted Zora near the stage, her dark curls pulled back as she helped arrange chairs. She waved when she saw me, breaking away to give me a quick hug. Gran, you made it. Dad's been asking if you were coming. Wouldn't miss it, I said, patting her cheek. Deacon was working the crowd, his campaign smile firmly in place. At 46, he had Howard's height and my determination. But lately, there was something calculated in his eyes that belonged to neither of us. Margot stood nearby, elegant in a tailored blue suit that probably cost more than most attendees made in a month. When she spotted me, her smile tightened imperceptibly. Constance, she greeted, air-kissing near my cheek. We weren't sure you'd make it. How's the arthritis today? I didn't have arthritis. She knew that. It was one of her subtle tactics, inventing ailments to make me seem frailer than I was. Never better, I replied smoothly. Though my memory is sharp as ever, I recall every conversation quite clearly these days. Something flickered in her eyes, uncertainty, perhaps even fear, before her political mask slipped back into place. Wonderful. We value your support so much. The campaign donors are particularly impressed by your journalistic legacy. I'm sure they are, I said, watching her carefully. Integrity is such a rare commodity these days. Before she could respond, Deacon spotted us and came over, throwing an arm around my shoulders. Mom, you're looking good. His campaign voice, slightly louder than necessary. Are you staying for the whole speech? I'm announcing my education initiative. I'll be right in the front row, I promised, searching his face for the son I raised. Was he aware of what Margot was planning? Was he complicit? The speech was typical political fare, promises of reform, anecdotes about struggling teachers, commitments to the future of Michigan's children. Once, this would have made me proud. Deacon had been a dedicated high school history teacher before Margot convinced him his real calling was politics. Now, watching him perform, I wondered if he remembered the idealistic young man who had once vowed never to become one of those talking heads who promise everything and deliver nothing. Afterward, as supporters crowded around to shake his hand, I slipped out early. I had work to do. The next morning, I met with Bernard Klein, an elder law attorney Imani had recommended. His office was in Ann Arbor, far enough from Winchester that I wouldn't run into anyone who might report back to Deacon or Margot. "Ms. Reeves, your situation isn't uncommon," he said, after I explained my concerns. "Unfortunately, financial elder abuse often comes from family members who feel entitled to assets." "I'm not being abused," I said sharply. "I'm being targeted. There's a difference." He nodded, unperturbed by my correction. "You're right, and you're wise to take preventative action. Based on what you've told me, we should immediately secure your assets in a way that protects them from potential manipulation." We spent 2 hours restructuring my finances. Howard had left me well provided for, and my own career had built a substantial retirement fund. The Pulitzer had come with prize money that I'd invested wisely. All told, I was worth considerably more than most people realized, including, I suspected, Margot, who likely underestimated just how golden the goose was. "We'll establish an irrevocable trust," Bernard explained. "Unlike a revocable trust, once it's created, even you can't change it without meeting specific conditions. This means no one can force or manipulate you into modifying it, not even if they try to declare me incompetent." The question hurt to ask, but I had to know. "The trust will include provisions specifically addressing that possibility. Additionally, we'll create a durable power of attorney for healthcare and finances, but instead of naming your son or daughter-in-law, we'll appoint someone you trust implicitly." Imani's name went on those documents. For financial oversight, I surprised myself by naming Lowell as a secondary agent. Old rivalries seemed insignificant in the face of current betrayals. As I left Bernard's office, a strange lightness filled me, despite the gravity of what I'd done. For 3 years since my stroke, I'd felt increasingly sidelined, not just professionally, but personally. Deacon and Margot made decisions without consulting me, spoke about me in the third person while I sat right there, dismissed my opinions as outdated. I'd started to believe them, retreating further into my home and memories. But that familiar fire of investigation had rekindled something vital within me. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. I drove to the offices of the Winchester Gazette, a small local paper that had once been a respected regional voice before budget cuts and internet competition reduced it to community bulletins and high school sports coverage. The editor, Philip Sanders, was an old colleague who'd taken the local position after his own medical issues made the pace of national reporting impossible. "Constance Reeves," he said, rising from his cluttered desk. "To what do I owe this honor? Don't tell me you're looking for work. I can barely afford the staff I have." "Not looking for a job, Phil. Looking for information." I settled into the chair across from him, and possibly offering a story in return. His eyebrows rose. "I'm listening. What do you know about my son's campaign finances?" Phil's expression shifted, caution replacing curiosity. "Deacon's popular around here. People are excited about having a local boy potentially in the state senate." "That's not what I asked." He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "There are rumors. Money appearing from nowhere. Consultants being paid well above market rate. Companies suddenly receiving county contracts after making donations." My heart sank, though I'd expected as much. "I need proof, Phil. Records, sources, paper trails. Why would I give that to a mother to use against her son? Because I'm not just a mother. I'm Constance Reeves, and if there's corruption happening, the people deserve to know, regardless of who's involved." He studied me for a long moment. "What's the story you're offering in return?" I leaned forward. "An exclusive on campaign finance corruption in the state senate race, written by Pulitzer Prize winner Constance Reeves. First-hand account of how far some people will go for power, even selling out their own family." Phil whistled low. "That would sell papers." He hesitated. "But Connie, are you sure? This could destroy your relationship with Deacon." I thought of Margot's voice, cold and calculating as she planned to use my money to buy herself a lakefront mansion. I thought of Deacon's increasingly rare calls, his dismissive tone when I questioned campaign decisions, the way he'd begun to treat me as a campaign prop rather than his mother. "I think that relationship is already on life support, Phil. And sometimes, the kindest thing to do is pull the plug." As I drove home through the early winter darkness, snow beginning to fall in thick, lazy flakes, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since before my stroke. The road ahead would be difficult. I might lose my son forever, but I'd spent my life pursuing truth and justice, even when it cost me personally. I wouldn't stop now, not when the stakes were highest. Let Margot think I was just a frail old woman with a fortune ripe for picking. Let her believe my silence was surrender. She had no idea who she was dealing with. Constance Reeves had spent a lifetime bringing down powerful men who thought themselves untouchable. My own daughter-in-law would soon discover she was no exception. And that mansion she planned to buy with my gold? I'd make sure she ended up homeless instead. For 3 days, I gathered evidence. The journalist in me knew that emotions without facts were just accusations. And accusations without proof would make me look like exactly what Margot wanted everyone to believe. A confused old woman with failing faculties. The snow continued to fall heavily over Winchester, blanketing the small town in pristine white that hid all manner of sins beneath. I'd always loved winter for this quality, the stark contrast of truth against deception, black ink on white paper, facts against lies. My dining room table became command central, covered with financial records, campaign finance reports, and notes from my conversations with Phil Sanders. Lowell had come through as well, sending over a manila envelope with his junior reporter's findings. Photographs of Margot meeting with developers, transcripts of conversations about property deals contingent on zoning changes that would require political influence, copies of checks with suspiciously round numbers written to shell companies. I was halfway through organizing this evidence when my doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass, I recognized Zora's silhouette. Hastily, I gathered the papers into a folder and tucked it into my desk drawer before answering. "Gran!" She burst in with the energy of youth, cheeks flushed from cold. "I've been calling you all morning. Didn't you hear your phone?" I hadn't, too absorbed in my investigation. "Sorry, sweetheart, I was upstairs." Her eyes darted around the living room, taking in the coffee cups and scattered newspapers. "Are you working on something? You've got that look you used to get when you were chasing a big story." Too perceptive by half, this girl. "Just organizing some old research files. What brings you by on a school day?" "Half day. Teacher conferences." She unwound her scarf, revealing a campaign button pinned to her sweater, Reeves for Senate. The sight of it made my stomach clench. "Actually, I came to ask you something." We moved to the kitchen, where I put the kettle on for tea, a ritual we'd shared since she was old enough to hold a cup. Zora perched on a stool at the counter, her fingers drumming a nervous pattern. "What's on your mind?" I prompted, setting 2 mugs down. "It's about Dad's campaign." She hesitated. "Something weird happened yesterday." My journalist's instincts snapped to attention, but I kept my expression neutral. "Oh?" I was helping organize donor files at headquarters, and I found this folder marked Lake Michigan Initiative. Inside were plans for this massive lakefront development. Luxury homes, a private marina, retail space. It had all these investment projections and a list of pre-approved buyers. The kettle whistled. I poured water over the tea bags, giving myself a moment to process this information. "Sounds like a standard development project. Your father's always been interested in economic growth." That's what I thought too. But then I saw Margot's name listed as an investor and future resident, and there were notes about using some trust fund to finance her portion. Zora looked up at me, her young face troubled. When I asked Dad about it, he got weird. Said it was private campaign business and I shouldn't have been looking through those files. "Did you happen to notice the location of this development?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Somewhere called Copper Harbor? On the Upper Peninsula." My fingers tightened around the mug. That pristine stretch of Michigan coastline had been the subject of environmental protection debates for years. Development there would require significant zoning changes and environmental regulation exemptions. Exactly the kind of thing a state senator could influence. "The thing is, Gran, the land they want to develop, it's protected wetlands. Dad taught me about the importance of those ecosystems in his environmental science unit when I was in his class 3 years ago. He used to say no amount of economic benefit was worth destroying natural habitats." Her voice cracked slightly. "What changed him?" I reached across the counter to squeeze her hand. "People are complicated, Zora. Sometimes they change when power or money is involved. Or when they marry someone like Margot," she muttered, then looked immediately guilty. "Sorry. That wasn't fair. What makes you say that? She sipped her tea, considering her words carefully. Margot's always pushing Dad. Nothing's ever enough. Our house is too small. His teacher's salary was too little. Now being a state senator isn't even enough. Yesterday, I heard her talking about congressional runs, maybe even governor someday. The pieces were falling into place. Margot wasn't just after my money. She was orchestrating a complete power play, using both my son and my finances as stepping stones for her ambition. Have you noticed anything else unusual? I asked. Zora hesitated. Margot's been weird about you lately. Keeps making comments about your health to Dad when she thinks I can't hear. Saying things like, maybe you shouldn't be living alone anymore, that your decision-making isn't what it used to be. She looked up, eyes fierce with loyalty. But that's bull. That's not true. You're sharper than most of my teachers. My chest tightened, with both love for my granddaughter and dread at Margot's machinations. She was laying groundwork, trying to establish a pattern of cognitive decline that could be used to challenge my financial independence. Gran? You look pale. Are you okay? I forced a smile. Just tired, sweetheart. Thank you for telling me this. After Zora left, promising to text me any other weird campaign stuff she noticed, I returned to my evidence pile with renewed purpose. The Lake Michigan Initiative folder she'd described would be crucial evidence. I needed to get my hands on it. That evening, I called Imani. I need a favor that skirts ethical boundaries, I said without preamble. Those are my favorite kind, she replied. What's up? I need you to request a meeting with my son about potentially endorsing his campaign. Your reputation as a constitutional law professor would appeal to him. During that meeting, I need you to get access to files regarding a development called the Lake Michigan Initiative. Constance, her voice held a warning note. What you're asking borders on corporate espionage. It's not espionage when it's investigating corruption, I countered. Besides, we're not stealing anything. Just confirming the existence of documents that suggest a state Senate candidate is planning to use his position to benefit from environmentally destructive development, potentially using misappropriated funds. Her sigh carried decades of friendship and exasperation. You never did know when to stop pushing. That's why I won a Pulitzer. It's also why you had a stroke. The words landed like a slap, but I knew she spoke from love. Fine, I'll see what I can do. But Connie, be careful. If Margot is as calculating as you say, pushing her into a corner could be dangerous. I've faced down corrupt officials and corporate criminals. I can handle one ambitious daughter-in-law. This is different. Those people weren't sharing holiday dinners with you. After hanging up, I sat in my darkened living room, watching snow fall past the streetlights. Imani was right. This was different. More personal, more painful, but also more necessary. My phone buzzed with a text from Lowell. Found something big. Need to meet in person. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Riverside Park bench. The old-school cloak and dagger approach made me smile despite everything. Some habits never die. The next day brought clear skies but bitter cold. I dressed in layers, my warmest coat, and drove to Riverside Park. The snow-covered landscape was nearly deserted, too cold for casual visitors. Lowell was already there, his tall figure unmistakable on the bench overlooking the frozen river. This better be good, I said, sitting beside him. It's 20 degrees out here. Good for your reputation, bad for your family, he replied, handing me a thick envelope. My junior reporter didn't just find evidence of questionable campaign donations. She found a direct link between Margot's PR firm and several of the largest donors to Deacon's campaign. I opened the envelope and scanned the contents. Bank statements showing transfers from Margot's company to consultants who then donated identical amounts to Deacon's campaign fund. She's laundering campaign contributions, I whispered, the implications sinking in. Classic straw donor scheme. Lowell nodded. But that's not all. Look at the last page. I flipped to it, finding a photocopy of a trust document. My trust document, the one I'd established through my late husband's law firm 15 years ago. Where did you get this? My voice was barely audible. Margot requested a copy from the firm last month, used campaign letterhead to make it look official. Junior caught it because she was tracking all correspondence related to campaign finances. My fingers trembled, not from cold or the lingering effects of my stroke, but from a visceral sense of violation. She's been planning this for months, I said. Maybe years. The question is, Lowell shifted to face me, his weathered face serious, what are you going to do about it? Exactly what I've always done. Follow the evidence and publish the truth. His eyebrows rose. You'd really expose your own son's campaign? This could end his political career before it begins. Hell, depending on how involved he is, it could lead to criminal charges. The thought made me sick, but I squared my shoulders. If he's knowingly involved in corruption, he deserves the consequences. If he's being manipulated by Margot, then this might be the wake-up call he needs. There's a third possibility, Lowell said quietly, that he knows exactly what's happening and doesn't care. That power has changed him fundamentally. I couldn't bear to consider that option. Not yet. I need to talk to him first, I decided. Without Margot present, give him a chance to explain. Lowell's expression suggested he thought I was being naive, but he nodded. Be careful, Connie, and record everything, for your protection. As I drove home, a plan began forming in my mind. Confronting Deacon directly risked alerting Margot before I had all my evidence in order. I needed a different approach. The opportunity came sooner than expected. That evening, Deacon called. Mom, can you watch Zora tomorrow night? Margot and I have a fundraising dinner with the County Business Association. Of course, I agreed, perhaps too quickly. Happy to help. Great, we'll drop her off around 6. He paused. How are you feeling? Margot mentioned you seemed a bit confused at the rally last week. My jaw clenched. Did she? I don't recall any confusion on my part. She said you were making strange comments about remembering conversations clearly. Seemed paranoid. I nearly laughed at the transparent attempt to establish a pattern of mental decline. The only thing I'm confused about is why my daughter-in-law would misrepresent a perfectly normal conversation. Mom, his voice took on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. No one is misrepresenting anything. We're just concerned. You've been through a lot, and at my age, I can still recognize gaslighting when I hear it, I interrupted sharply. I'll see you tomorrow at 6. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking with anger. The conversation confirmed my suspicions. Margot was actively working to undermine my credibility, and Deacon was either complicit or blind. The next evening, they arrived precisely at 6. Zora bounded in with her backpack full of homework and art supplies, while Deacon and Margot lingered in the entryway. Margot was resplendent in a designer dress, diamonds glittering at her throat, paid for, no doubt, by campaign funds or my son's depleted savings. We shouldn't be too late, Deacon said, checking his watch. 10 or 11 at the latest. Take your time, I smiled. Zora and I always find ways to entertain ourselves. Margot's eyes swept over my living room, assessing. Your house is looking a bit cluttered, Constance. If you're finding it hard to keep up with things, we could help you hire a service. How thoughtful, I replied. But I prefer my papers where I can find them. A journalist's organized chaos. Former journalist, she corrected with a tight smile. Though I'm sure those were exciting days. We're making new history now with Deacon's campaign. Speaking of which, I turned to my son. I'd love to hear more about your environmental policy positions, particularly regarding development in protected areas like Copper Harbor. Deacon's expression flickered. Surprise, then wariness. That's a complex issue. We can discuss it another time. Of course, I said pleasantly. I'm particularly interested in the Lake Michigan initiative. It sounds like quite an ambitious project. Margot's face paled slightly before she recovered her composure. Where did you hear about that? Oh, I still have friends in development circles. People talk. I waved a hand dismissively. It sounds like a wonderful investment opportunity. The tension in the room thickened. Deacon checked his watch again. We should go. We're going to be late. Yes, don't keep your donors waiting, I smiled. I imagine they're quite eager to discuss future opportunities. After they left, Zora emerged from her bedroom where she'd been texting friends. Are they gone? Yes, just us now. She flopped onto the couch. Thank God. Margot was being extra fake tonight. That sugary voice she uses makes my teeth hurt. I laughed, grateful for her perceptiveness. How about some dinner? I made your favorite pasta. While we ate, I casually brought up the campaign. Your dad seems very busy these days. Do you get to spend much time with him? Zora pushed pasta around her plate. Not really. He's always at meetings or events. And when he is home, he's either on the phone or talking strategy with Margot. That must be hard. She shrugged, attempting teenage nonchalance, but I saw the hurt beneath. Whatever, I'm busy too. College applications and newspaper stuff. Any papers you're working on now? Her eyes lit up. Actually, yes. I'm investigating the school board's allocation of sports funding. The boys' teams get 3 times more money than girls' teams, even though our girls' basketball team made state finals last year. Pride swelled in my chest. Sounds like an important story. Are you running into any obstacles? The administration doesn't want to give me the actual budget numbers. They keep saying they're processing my request. She made air quotes with her fingers. Ah, the classic Stonewall. I know it well. I hesitated, then decided to take a risk. You know, investigative journalism sometimes requires creative approaches to information gathering. She leaned forward, intrigued. Like what? Sometimes the information you need is already public, just hidden in plain sight. School board meetings are recorded and minutes are published, right? Yeah, but they're super vague. But the detailed budget is likely referenced in those minutes as an appendix or supplementary document. Those documents are public record, even if they're not prominently displayed. Understanding dawned on her face. So I could request those specific documents instead of asking for the budget generally? Precisely. I smiled. And sometimes information comes from unexpected sources. The person who processes payroll might know more than the athletic director. The custodian who orders supplies sees every purchase order. We spent the next hour discussing investigative techniques, and I felt myself coming alive in a way I hadn't in years. Teaching Zora was like watching my own passion for truth reborn in a new generation. After she went to bed, I enacted the next phase of my plan. I went to Deacon's home office, the same room where I'd overheard Margot's damning phone call. I knew I was crossing a line, but the stakes justified the means. The office was meticulously organized, Margot's influence, no doubt. I went straight to the filing cabinet, quickly locating campaign folders. Nothing about the Lake Michigan initiative, but I found something equally valuable, a folder labeled CR Estate Planning. Inside were notes about my finances, my medical history, and most disturbing of all, a draft petition for conservatorship, claiming I was no longer competent to manage my own affairs. The document was dated 3 weeks ago, just waiting for the right moment to file. My hands shook as I used my phone to photograph each page. Then I carefully returned everything exactly as I'd found it and continued searching. In Deacon's desk drawer, beneath a false bottom I discovered by chance, I found a thumb drive. I plugged it into my phone using an adapter I carried for journalistic emergencies. The drive contained a treasure trove of incriminating documents, the complete Lake Michigan initiative plans, showing how regulatory hurdles would be cleared once Deacon took office, the list of investors, including Margot, and projected profits. Most damning of all, a document outlining how my assets would be used as collateral for the initial investment phase, with a note that read, "Access available post-election through conservatorship filing." They weren't just planning to steal my money. They were already spending it, counting on gaining control of my assets through legal means. The cold calculation of it stole my breath. I copied everything to my phone, returned the thumb drive, and left the office exactly as I'd found it. Back in the living room, I sent all the files to my email, to Lowell, to Imani, and to Bernard Klein. Insurance, in case anything happened to me or my phone. When Deacon and Margot returned shortly after 11, I was sitting calmly in my armchair, reading a book. "How was the fundraiser?" I asked pleasantly. "Very successful," Margot said, unwinding her cashmere scarf. "Several major donors committed to the campaign." "How wonderful. I'm sure they're expecting a good return on their investment." Something in my tone must have alerted her because her eyes narrowed slightly. "It's an investment in Michigan's future, of course." "Of course," I smiled. "And speaking of investments, I've been doing some financial restructuring of my own recently. Estate planning, you know. At my age, it's important to have everything in order." Deacon glanced at Margot, a quick, nervous look that confirmed everything. "That's probably wise, Mom. We could help you with that if you'd like." "No need. It's all taken care of." I stood, gathering my dignity around me like armor. I've always believed in being prepared. For anything. As they left with a sleepy Zora, I caught Margot looking back at me, calculation in her eyes. She knew something had changed, but couldn't quite identify what. Let her wonder. The endgame was approaching faster than she realized. And like all the corrupt power players I'd exposed throughout my career, she had no idea what was coming until it was too late. The next morning, I woke to 3 missed calls from Deacon and a text message asking me to call him urgently. I ignored them, instead making an appointment with Bernard Klein for that afternoon. The evidence I'd gathered needed to be properly documented and protected. This was no longer just about safeguarding my assets. It was about exposing corruption that could affect the entire Upper Peninsula ecosystem. Snow was falling again as I drove to Ann Arbor, thick flakes obscuring visibility. The weather matched my mood, a brewing storm, gathering force. For decades, I'd pursued justice through my reporting, exposing wrongdoing without fear or favor. But never had I imagined turning that same uncompromising lens on my own flesh and blood. Bernard's expression grew increasingly grave as I laid out the evidence I'd gathered. The photographs of documents from Deacon's office, the files from the thumb drive, Lowell's research on campaign finance irregularities, and Zora's inadvertent discovery of the Lake Michigan initiative. "This is extremely serious," he said finally, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "The campaign finance violations alone could trigger a federal investigation. And this conservatorship document," he tapped the photo of the petition I'd found. "This demonstrates clear intent to exploit legal mechanisms designed to protect vulnerable seniors." "I'm not a vulnerable senior," I reminded him sharply. "No, you're not, but they're building a case to portray you as one." He replaced his glasses, his expression somber. "Ms. Reeves, I must ask, are you prepared for what happens next? Taking legal action against your son and daughter-in-law would have permanent repercussions for your family." I gazed out his office window at the snow-blanketed university campus below. Students hurried along the paths, young lives untouched by the kind of betrayal I was facing. For a moment, I allowed myself to remember Deacon as a boy, bright, compassionate, with a fierce sense of justice that had once made me so proud. Where had that boy gone? "The truth has always been my North Star," I said finally. "I can't abandon it now, even when it hurts." Bernard nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then we need to move quickly. Based on these documents, I believe they're planning to file for conservatorship within weeks, possibly days. We need to preemptively secure your assets and prepare countermeasures." We spent the next 3 hours executing a comprehensive plan. The trust I'd already established was reinforced with additional protections. Bernard filed emergency motions to block any conservatorship attempts. Most importantly, we documented everything I'd discovered about the Lake Michigan initiative and the campaign finance violations, creating a legal record that couldn't be dismissed as the ramblings of a confused old woman. "What about the journalistic angle?" Bernard asked as we concluded. "You mentioned working with Lowell Freeman. Are you planning to publish your findings?" "Yes, but timing is crucial. The story needs to break when it will have maximum impact, and when I have ironclad protection in place." On the drive home, my phone rang again. Deacon. This time I answered, putting him on speaker as I navigated the snowy highway. "Mom, where have you been?" "I've been calling all day." His voice held an edge of panic. "I had appointments," I replied calmly. "Is something wrong?" "Yes, something's wrong. Margot can't find some important campaign documents. She thinks they might have been in my office when we were at your house last night." My heart raced, but my voice remained steady. "What kind of documents?" "Just campaign strategy materials. Nothing important." The lie hung between us, almost tangible in its transparency. He knew exactly what was missing. Nothing was missing, of course, but they'd somehow realized I'd accessed their files. "I didn't see anything like that," I said. "Though I rarely go into your father's old office these days. Too many memories." A pause. "It wasn't in Dad's office. It would have been in mine." "Your office? Why would I go in there?" Another pause, longer this time. "No reason. I just thought, maybe you were looking for something." "The only thing I've been looking for lately is the truth, Deacon. It's surprisingly elusive these days." "What's that supposed to mean?" The edge in his voice sharpened. "It means I raised you to be better than this," I said, unable to contain my disappointment any longer. "Whatever you and Margot are planning, it's not too late to step back." Mom, I don't know what you think is happening, but you're confused. Margot and I are worried about you. Your behavior has been erratic. These paranoid accusations. Save it for the conservatorship hearing, I cut in, my voice steel. Though I doubt you'll get that far now. Dead silence on the line. Then, very quietly, what did you do? What I've always done. Followed the evidence. Unlike you, I haven't forgotten who I am or what I stand for. I ended the call as I pulled into my driveway, hands shaking on the steering wheel. The confrontation I'd been dreading had begun, and there was no turning back now. Inside my house, I immediately sensed something was wrong. Nothing obvious, no broken windows or forced doors, but items on my desk were slightly rearranged. The folder containing my notes had been moved perhaps an inch from where I'd left it. My laptop was closed, though I distinctly remembered leaving it open. Someone had been here while I was gone. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the winter temperature. I pulled out my phone and called Imani. I need to stay with you for a few days, I said without preamble. My house has been searched. Pack a bag, she replied immediately. I'll be there in 20 minutes. While waiting, I did a careful inventory. My physical notes were still present, though clearly examined. My laptop was untouched. They wouldn't have been able to access it without my password. The thumb drive containing copies of the evidence was safe, hidden inside a hollowed-out book in my bedroom, an old journalist's trick from countries where press freedom wasn't guaranteed. Most telling of all, the trail of exposed filing tabs I'd deliberately set as a trap, something I'd learned from an intelligence officer I'd interviewed decades ago, had been disrupted. Someone had definitely gone through my files. When Imani arrived, her normally composed face was tight with concern. Are you sure you weren't just being paranoid? Maybe you moved things yourself? 45 years of investigative reporting teaches you to trust your instincts, I replied, grabbing my hastily packed suitcase. Someone was here, looking for what I found in Deacon's office. Her Georgetown townhouse was warm and welcoming, filled with books and art from her many international travels. She settled me in her guest room, then poured us both generous glasses of red wine. Tell me everything, she said, curling into her favorite armchair. I recounted the day's events, from my meeting with Bernard, to the confrontational call with Deacon, to the evidence of the search. They're panicking, Imani observed, which means they know you have something damaging. But they don't know how much, I replied. They can't be sure what I saw or copied, which makes them even more dangerous. She leaned forward, her academic's precision giving way to the fierce protectiveness of a lifelong friend. Connie, you need to go public with this now. Not just the legal filings, the whole story. Once it's in the open, they can't silence it. I'm meeting Lowell tomorrow. We're planning the exposé. I sipped my wine, feeling the weight of what was to come. But Imani, this will destroy Deacon's career. Possibly send him to prison if he's complicit in the campaign finance fraud. And if he's innocent? Just manipulated by Margot? I shook my head sadly. The evidence suggests otherwise. The conservatorship petition was in his handwriting. His signature is on the Lake Michigan initiative documents. Then he's made his choice, she said softly, just as you must make yours. That night I barely slept, tormented by memories of Deacon as a child, his small hand in mine as we marched in protests for press freedom, his proud face when he told me he wanted to be a teacher to make a difference like you do, Mom. How had that idealistic boy become the man who would try to declare his own mother incompetent for financial gain? Morning brought another complication. A text from Zora. Something weird is happening. Dad and Margot fighting about you. Overheard Margot say, she knows too much, and Dad say, we can still fix this. What's going on? I stared at the message, heart pounding. The situation was escalating faster than I'd anticipated. Zora was now caught in the middle, and I needed to protect her. Everything's fine, sweetie. Grown-up disagreements. Can you meet me after school? The coffee shop on Elm. Her reply came instantly. Sounds serious. I'll be there. Lowell was already waiting when I arrived at his office in downtown Winchester, a converted warehouse space where he ran what remained of the region's independent journalism. His face was grim. They've filed the conservatorship petition, he said without preamble, sliding a document across his desk. My court contact sent this over an hour ago. I stared at the legal filing, dated yesterday, but clearly prepared weeks ago. The language was clinical, devastating, showing signs of cognitive decline, paranoid accusations, inability to manage financial affairs, potential danger to herself. They must have expedited this after your phone call, Lowell observed. They're trying to discredit you before you can expose them. My hands clenched into fists. They're too late. How soon can we publish? The story's ready. We can go live tonight, in print tomorrow morning. He studied my face. Are you absolutely sure, Connie? This crosses a line that can't be uncrossed. They crossed that line when they plotted to steal my autonomy along with my money. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. But there's something else we need to consider. Zora texted me this morning. She's overheard things. She's meeting me later today. Lowell's expression softened. The girl's caught in an impossible situation. I need to tell her the truth before she reads it in your paper. She deserves that much. Agreed. And Connie? He reached across the desk to clasp my hand briefly. Whatever happens, you've done the right thing. The hard thing, but the right one. From Lowell's office, I went directly to meet Bernard Klein at the county courthouse. The conservatorship petition required an immediate response, and we filed our counter-motions along with evidence of the broader conspiracy. The clerk's eyes widened as she processed our paperwork, clearly recognizing the names involved. Small-town gossip would spread this news faster than any newspaper. By 3 o'clock, I was seated in the back corner of Elm Street Coffee, watching the door for Zora. The cafe was busy with after-school students, their voices creating a privacy-protecting hum of background noise. Zora arrived punctually, spotting me immediately. Even across the room, I could see the worry etched on her young face. She ordered a drink at the counter, then made her way to my table, sliding into the chair across from me. Gran, what's going on? Dad's been acting super weird, and Margot looks like she's about to explode. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Are you in some kind of trouble? I reached across the table to take her hand. Not trouble exactly, but I've discovered something serious about your father's campaign, and about Margot's plans. Her expression grew still, a maturity beyond her 17 years settling over her features. This is about that Lake Michigan project, isn't it? And something to do with your money? Yes. I hesitated, then decided she deserved the unvarnished truth. Margot has been planning to gain control of my assets through a conservatorship, a legal process claiming I'm no longer competent to manage my own affairs. They filed the petition yesterday. Zora's face paled. That's crazy. You're the most competent person I know. It gets worse. The campaign is involved in finance violations, essentially laundering money through Margot's PR firm. And the Lake Michigan initiative you discovered is a development project that would destroy protected wetlands. Your father and Margot are key investors, planning to use my money to finance their portion once they gain control of it. Her eyes filled with tears. Dad wouldn't do that. He taught us about environmental protection. He used to take me birdwatching in wetlands just like those. The pain in her voice broke my heart. People change, Zora. Power and money can corrupt even the best intentions. What are you going to do? I took a deep breath. I've already done it. The evidence has been submitted to the court to fight the conservatorship petition. And tomorrow morning, the Winchester Gazette will publish an exposé on the campaign finance violations and the development scheme. Her hand jerked away from mine. You're going to publicly expose Dad? Destroy his campaign? His reputation? His actions have done that, I said gently. I'm just bringing the truth to light. It's what I've always done. But he's your son. Her voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. She lowered it again, leaning closer. And he's my dad. Do you know what this will do to my life? To our family? The anguish in her eyes was almost unbearable. I'd been so focused on Margot's betrayal and Deacon's complicity that I hadn't fully considered the collateral damage to Zora. Innocent, yet inextricably caught in the crossfire. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it more than any apology I'd ever offered. If there was another way, there's always another way, she cut in. You could have talked to him privately, given him a chance to explain, to make it right. I tried, Zora. On the phone yesterday. He denied everything, then accused me of being confused and paranoid, the exact language they used in the conservatorship petition. She fell silent, her young face a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Loyalty to her father warring with her innate sense of justice, love for me clashing with the instinct to protect her immediate family. "I need to go," she said finally, standing abruptly. "I need to think. Zora, please, I'll call you later." She grabbed her backpack, then paused. "I love you, Gran, but this is a lot." I watched her leave, her shoulders hunched against more than just the cold. The victory I'd anticipated in exposing the truth suddenly felt hollow. What good was justice if it devastated those I loved most? Back at Imani's house, I paced her living room, second-guessing my decisions. Imani watched me with patient concern, letting me work through my turmoil aloud. Maybe Zora's right. Maybe there was another way, a private confrontation, a chance for Deacon to come clean without public humiliation. And if he denied everything? If Margot convinced him you were just a confused old woman imagining conspiracies? Would you have backed down? Imani challenged. "No," I admitted. "The truth matters too much." "Then stop torturing yourself. You're doing what you've always done, holding power accountable, even when it's painful." She rose, crossing to the window as headlights swept across the front of the house. "Speaking of which, you have visitors." Through the curtains, I saw Deacon's SUV parking at the curb. My breath caught as both he and Margot emerged, their faces grim in the glow of the streetlight. How did they know I was here? "Zora, probably," Imani guessed. "Do you want me to send them away?" I squared my shoulders. "No. I've been avoiding this confrontation too long already." Imani opened the door before they could knock, her tall figure imposing in the doorway. "Deacon, Margot, this is unexpected." "We need to speak with my mother," Deacon said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Privately, this is my home," Imani replied coolly. "Nothing happens here without my permission. And Constance doesn't go anywhere alone with you, while there's an active conservatorship petition alleging she's mentally incompetent." Margot stepped forward, her designer coat and perfect makeup a stark contrast to the raw emotion in her voice. "This is a family matter. With all due respect, Professor Washington, you're not family." "I've been family to Constance for 50 years, Imani countered, "which is why I'm not letting you manipulate her in my home." "It's all right, Imani," I said, moving to stand beside her. "Let's hear what they have to say." We moved to the living room, an uncomfortable tableau of forced civility. Deacon and Margot sat stiffly on the sofa, while Imani and I took the armchairs opposite. No one accepted the offer of coffee. "Zora told us you're planning to publish some kind of exposé," Deacon began, his face pale beneath his usual confidence. "About the campaign, about us." "Yes," I confirmed. "Tomorrow morning." "Mom, whatever you think you found, you're misinterpreting it. The Lake Michigan Initiative is a legitimate economic development project." "That would destroy protected wetlands," I interrupted. "The same wetlands you taught Zora about in your environmental science unit. The same ecosystems you once argued were irreplaceable." His jaw tightened. "Things are more complex than they seem. Yes, some land would be repurposed, but the economic benefits would flow primarily to you and Margot," I finished. "Particularly once you gained control of my assets through the conservatorship you filed yesterday." Margot leaned forward, her composure cracking slightly. "That petition was for your own protection. You're not thinking clearly. Breaking into our home, stealing documents. I didn't break in. I was invited to babysit. And I didn't steal anything, just photographed the evidence of your conspiracy." I met her gaze steadily. "Including your plans to use my gold to buy yourself a mansion, as you so eloquently put it." Her face flushed. "You misheard. I heard exactly what you said, just as I saw exactly what you wrote in those documents." I turned to my son. "Deacon, I raised you better than this. Your father would be ashamed." The mention of Howard struck home. Deacon flinched as if physically struck. "Leave Dad out of this." "I can't. Everything you're jeopardizing, your integrity, your career, your relationship with your daughter, these were values he helped instill in you. Values you've abandoned for what? Political power? A lakefront property?" "It's not that simple," he protested, but his voice had lost its conviction. "It never is," I acknowledged. "But the fundamental choice is very simple. You can be the man your father and I raised you to be, or you can be the man Margot has shaped you into. You can't be both." Margot stood abruptly. "This is absurd. We came here to reason with you, but clearly that's impossible." You've constructed this elaborate conspiracy theory because you can't accept that your relevance has faded. You were somebody once, but now you're just a bitter old woman who can't let go of the spotlight." Her words were calculated to wound, and they found their mark with surgical precision. But I'd faced down worse in my career: dictators, corrupt officials, corporate criminals who threatened not just my reputation, but my life. Compared to them, Margot was an amateur. "If the story is published," Deacon said quietly, "it will destroy everything: my career, our family's reputation, Zora's last year of high school. You should have considered those consequences before you decided to declare me incompetent and steal my life savings," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside. "Mom, please." For the first time, genuine desperation crept into his voice. "We can fix this. Withdraw the story. We'll drop the conservatorship petition. We'll find another way to finance the development without involving your assets." "So you admit it," I said softly. "Everything I've alleged is true." His silence was confirmation enough. Margot grabbed his arm. "Don't say another word, Deacon. She's clearly recording this conversation." I wasn't, but her paranoia was revealing. "The story runs tomorrow, unless you do one thing." Hope flickered in Deacon's eyes. "What?" "Withdraw from the race, publicly, tonight. Cite personal reasons, health concerns, whatever fiction preserves your dignity. But end the campaign." "That's insane," Margot sputtered. "After all the work, all the money." "Your other option is public disgrace, possible criminal charges, and guaranteed financial ruin once your donors realize they've been defrauded," I said calmly. "Your choice." Deacon looked broken, caught between his wife's ambition and his mother's ultimatum. "I need time to think." "You have until midnight," I replied. "That's when the story goes to print." After they left, Imani poured us both a stiff drink. That was both the most painful and most impressive thing I've ever witnessed. "You didn't even raise your voice." "I learned long ago that power speaks softly," I said, my hands finally beginning to shake as the adrenaline receded. "The question is, will he make the right choice?" "Does it matter?" she asked. "Either way, you've won. The conservatorship will be dismissed with the evidence you've submitted. Your assets are protected. The truth will come out one way or another." "It matters," I said softly, thinking of Zora's anguished face in the coffee shop. "Not for me, but for them. For what remains of our family." At 11:58 p.m., my phone chimed with a news alert. Deacon Reeves had announced his withdrawal from the state Senate race, citing family health concerns that required his full and immediate attention. 2 minutes later, Lowell called. "We're pulling the story," he said, a mix of disappointment and relief in his voice. "You got what you wanted without firing the nuclear option." "Not everything," I replied, thinking of the trust destroyed, the relationships fractured. "But enough." As midnight struck, I sat in Imani's guest room, staring at my reflection in the window glass. The woman looking back at me appeared older than she had just days before, the lines of her face deeper, the weight of victory heavy on her shoulders. But her eyes were clear and certain. Some prices were worth paying for truth, for justice, for self-respect. My phone lit up with a text from Zora. "Dad just told me he's quitting the race. Said you showed him he'd lost his way. I don't understand everything that happened, but I think you did the right thing. I love you, Gran." A single tear slid down my cheek as I typed my reply. "I love you too. Always have. Always will. Come see me tomorrow." Her response came instantly. First thing in the morning. Perhaps not everything was lost after all. Spring arrived in Winchester with the determined optimism that follows every Michigan winter. The last patches of dirty snow melted away, revealing tender green shoots pushing through the soil. Nature's resilience never failed to inspire me, especially now, as I navigated the new landscape of my family relationships. 3 months had passed since that fateful night when Deacon withdrew from the race. The immediate aftermath had been painful: recriminations, tears, and stony silences as each of us processed what had happened. Margot had left town shortly afterward, unable to face the whispered gossip that inevitably spread through small communities. The official story was that she'd taken a job opportunity in Chicago, but everyone understood the marriage was effectively over. Deacon had moved into a small apartment near the high school where he'd returned to teaching history. The humility of this choice had surprised me. I'd expected bitterness, blame, perhaps even continued attempts to justify his actions. Instead, he seemed to have embraced the painful process of rediscovering his core values, the principles he'd abandoned during his political ascent. Our relationship remained fragile, tentative conversations, carefully navigating around the rawest wounds. But we were talking. A start, if not yet a reconciliation. He'd apologized, not with dramatic gestures or flowing speeches, but in quiet moments of recognition. "You were right," he'd said during our last meeting. "I lost myself. I became someone I never thought I'd be." The conservatorship petition had been withdrawn, the court documents sealed. The Lake Michigan initiative had collapsed without Deacon's political influence to push through the environmental exemptions. The protected wetlands remained safe, at least for now. The lawyers had done their work, ensuring my assets remained under my control, protected by the irrevocable trust Bernard had established. Zora had been my salvation through it all. Unlike the adults who became entangled in their own justifications and defenses, she cut through the complications with teenage directness. "People messed up," she declared during one of our Saturday morning breakfasts. "Dad messed up, Margot definitely messed up, but we're still family. We figure it out." Her wisdom had been a guiding light as I navigated the aftermath. When the initial crisis passed, I'd returned to my own home, reclaiming my space and independence. But something had changed in me. The forced retirement I'd resented for 3 years no longer felt like an ending, but a transition. Today I was preparing for a new beginning. My living room had been transformed into a makeshift recording studio, lights borrowed from the high school media department, a professional microphone on a stand, and my laptop positioned at the perfect angle. Zora moved around the space, adjusting equipment with practiced ease. "You're sure the lighting is right?" I asked, nervousness fluttering in my stomach. "It's perfect, Gran. Trust me, I've filmed enough for my channel to know what works." She stepped back, assessing the setup with a critical eye. "Besides, your subscribers care more about what you're saying than Hollywood production values." Subscribers. The word still amazed me. What had started as Zora's suggestion, "You should start a YouTube channel about investigative journalism, Gran," had blossomed into something unexpected. Truth Matters with Constance Reeves had attracted a modest but growing audience of journalism students, retired reporters, and civic-minded citizens interested in understanding how investigative reporting worked. I wasn't breaking major stories anymore, but I was teaching others how to do it, sharing techniques honed over decades of reporting. Today's episode would focus on financial investigations, following money trails, identifying shell companies, and recognizing the warning signs of fraud. Knowledge that had saved my own assets and autonomy, now shared with others who might need it. Lowell had become a regular guest, our old rivalry transformed into a bantering partnership that viewers seemed to enjoy. Imani occasionally appeared to discuss the legal aspects of investigating corruption. Even Phil from the Winchester Gazette had participated in an episode about local reporting in the digital age. Deacon knew about the channel, but had never watched it, or so he claimed. Zora had hinted otherwise, suggesting he'd seen every episode, but wasn't ready to acknowledge this new chapter in my life. "We're all set," Zora announced, checking the final connections. "Ready when you are." I smoothed my jacket, the same one I'd worn for my Pulitzer acceptance speech years ago, and sat in the chair positioned before the camera. At 72, my hands still trembled slightly from the stroke, and the lines on my face told stories of both triumph and heartbreak. But my voice remained strong, my mind sharp, and my purpose clear. "You know, you've helped a lot of people with these videos," Zora said, her hand on my shoulder. "Last week, Mrs. Abernathy from my economics class said her grandmother used your advice about trust documents to protect herself from a sketchy financial advisor." Pride warmed my chest. "One person at a time. That's how change happens. Just like your reporting days," she smiled. "Except now your reach is potentially global." As she counted down to start recording, I reflected on the journey of the past months. The pain had been necessary, the confrontations unavoidable. But from that crucible had emerged something unexpected. Not just the protection of my assets, but the reclamation of my voice and purpose. Margot had sneered that I'd use my gold to buy a mansion. Instead, I'd use something far more valuable: my experience, my knowledge, my hard-won wisdom to build something that couldn't be taken away or controlled by others. The red light on the camera blinked on. I smiled into the lens, speaking the words that had begun every episode. The truth matters. I'm Constance Reeves, and today we're discussing how to follow the money. After all, some treasures are worth more than gold, and nobody could make me homeless in the house of my own integrity. If you've experienced family trying to take advantage of you financially, drop a comment below. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories and advice on protecting what's rightfully yours. The truth is your greatest weapon, and I'm here to help you wield it.